So what were the elements of Stefanski's presentation that convinced you guys that we'll make something out of Baker Mayfield?
Sure, I think Jimmy mentioned it first. We looked at all sorts of different coaches, defense and offense, so it wasn't necessarily a prerequisite, but when we talked to Kevin, it certainly was an advantage as he's worked with so many different quarterbacks and guys with, as he mentioned, different styles, different personalities, and has had success with almost every one of them. So it's certainly helpful to have that in the building.
Paul, I believe this is your third search that you've been involved with in helping the Haslams pick a coach. I guess from your perspective, because we don't know a lot about you, we know your background obviously, but what makes a good coach? I mean, obviously X's and O's is important, leadership is important, but that's also something you can't necessarily quantify on a piece of paper. So I guess could you maybe explain your take or philosophy on, what really makes a quality coach?
Sure. Well, I'd say this, and this goes for a lot of the people we talk to, even in our research around the game to get advice on what makes a great head coach, whether it's players, other coaches, etc. I think most of them would actually downplay the importance of scheme, X's and O's. It really is about leadership, I think, more than anything else. Now, leadership has a lot of different components, right? What kind of communicator is somebody? How collaborative is he? How natural or authentic is he? I think all those things are important, but they all really point toward leadership. And that's ultimately what we were looking for first and foremost in this process.
Well, how did you, you've been so connected to be, from last year to this year, a fan of Kevin Stefanski. Did you find him, or what intrigued you about him?
No, and I don't know where some of these reports came from. I mean, obviously last year he did a great job in our process. There were other people who sort of found him. Last year when we went to the process, we did reference work on probably north of 50 candidates. And he was one of them, and he really emerged really through that work and said, boy, this is someone we need to meet. And then he did a terrific job in the interview. As has been reported, he ended up being one of our finalists, and so we felt like it was prudent to bring him back, this year. He was the only one we brought back to this year's process, but no, it really was the work of all of our sort of football people and the background reference work they had done that brought him into the pool last year.
Was there any more impressive experience with being the offensive coordinator for a full year? Did you learn anything new about him this year?
Yeah, well, I think he did learn something about himself this year. I mean, even being the coordinator, working with Gary, they implemented a whole new system there this year. So I think there were definitely some learnings there. But I think the thing that was reassuring for us is when we went and met him this year, he's still the same person. He's still the leader we remembered. He still is very comfortable in his own skin, makes everybody around him comfortable sort of right away. And I think that made us all feel good about it.
What does analytics say about Kevin Stefanski as a coach?
Yeah, I think people have a really warped view of maybe what analytics is. I think I maybe have a very different conception than what everybody else has. When I think of analytics, I just think of having sort of frameworks to make decisions under uncertainty. I mean, look, everything we do in these jobs is really built around uncertainty. I mean, what players we're going to take in the draft, what we're going to call on 3rd and 8. I mean, it's all about uncertainty, right? So what frameworks can you create that at least maybe stack the odds in your favor, give you a better chance of being successful? And whether that's drafting a player or hiring a coach or calling a play, it's not necessarily about numbers and spreadsheets. For us, it was this, in terms of what the analytics said about Kevin Stefanski, my answer would be, this is what our references said. This is the personality testing that we did. This is what the interview process was. Those aren't numbers, or again spreadsheets or anything like that. But it is the framework we use to try to come up with the best candidate. And ultimately, Kevin checked all the boxes.
Well, how much pressure was on this group to get this right? I mean, obviously Baker going on multiple coaches. The math. You can't keep doing this every 2 years.
Yeah, no, look, I'm a big believer that there's a real cost to change. Forget about financial costs. There's a cost to turnover. They talked about it in there, the different coordinators that people have had to go through, different people in the building, different philosophies, different schemes. There's a real cost to that. We have to get this right. When we went, when we embarked on this, what was it, close to 2 weeks ago now, we talked about what we're looking for is we're looking for someone for the next 10 plus years. I mean, that's our goal here. That's what we want. And ultimately, if we want to be a championship level organization, which is what we're shooting for, that's what they have. They have coaches that have been in place for a long time. Now, we can't jump from, year 1 to year 10, in 2 years. It's going to take a while, but that's really what we're looking for, was someone that we thought could give us some, sustainable success. And some real continuity for a long period of time. And someone who could really be, for lack of a better term, sort of the CEO of the football organization, especially in terms of his leadership and his ability to bring everybody together, both on the field and off the field. I think that's what we have in Kevin.
What did you change about your process this time around? Because obviously the previous processes didn't work out, and it might sound harsh, but you can say they failed. So what was different about this process that gives you the belief that this one's going to succeed?
I probably won't comment on the last ones because I don't think it's necessarily fair. But look, I would tell you, I think we feel we ran a very thorough and deliberate process this time. We feel great about the result. At the same time, I don't think that's going to give anybody any comfort, right? We need to go out and win. We need to go win football games, right? And I don't think there's anything I can say today to convince people that, hey, we got the right answer. I think Kevin did a great job, and I think his work will speak for itself. But ultimately, the proof is going to be in how we go out and play.
It was reported by Adam Schefter that your contract was up. Given that Jimmy said your role is unchanged, should we assume you have a new deal with the Browns?
My feeling has been that and I've talked to Jimmy about this, let's get the head coach in place, let's get the GM in place, the rest of it will work itself out. I'm not concerned about it. I expect to be here.
You were asked about your, Jimmy was asked about, the fact that you spent some time in California, you spent some time here. How will that change going forward, or will it change? And what does that mean, you being there and working in a kind of remote environment? Can you explain a little bit about how that works?
Sure. It's funny. I've seen a report that, I live in San Diego. I think my wife and kids would take issue with that characterization. Look, I've been here every week since the beginning of training camp. 10 years ago, when my wife and I first moved to San Diego, we have a large extended family in San Diego that's incredibly helpful, incredibly supportive. These jobs, this industry is tough, and we decided at that time that we wanted our kids to be able to grow up in that environment. And if it meant that I would have to take on the burden of travel to do my job, and that's what I was going to do. And this was before I even went to the New York Mets, and that's the way I did that job for 5 years. And now I've continued on with Cleveland. Look, I don't think it hasn't been an issue. Like I said, I'm here every single week, and we get our work done.
Could you spell out exactly what your role is now that the search is over? What do you do?
So I love, believe my kids ask me the same question because they want to tell people at school, what is it that you actually do? Look, Kevin talked a lot today about a shared vision, right? I think my role really first and foremost is to not only help us create, but also implement that shared vision, and then ultimately make sure that we stick to it, really relentlessly. And that's really my role. So I look at all the processes that are within a football operation. And whether that's hiring someone, whether that's how we do scouting, whether it's how we, look at things, with numbers, I, sort of dig into all those processes and make sure that they align with our vision, and that we all as a group, continue to stay aligned and be on the same page as Kevin said.
So will you be involved in the draft?
Sure.
And what role will you play in the draft?
A process-oriented role. I'm not going to pick the players, but I am going to try to make sure that the players we do pick, again, align with our vision of what we believe is a winning franchise. I've had the opportunity to be around some great organizations, in multiple sports. And one thing that's pretty clear across all of them is that they all have an identity, right? A way. You hear about, the Patriot way, or, back in the day, the Dodger way, or whatever it might be. The teams that are great are relentless about implementing that way. And that's what we need to do here. And I think that's really my charge. So my charge is not to watch tape and say, oh man, this guy's got great feet. We've got scouts who are way better and way more qualified than I am to do that. But when we come down to make a selection, it is my role to say, okay, are we making a decision here that actually aligns with our way? And does it make sense?
Couple more here, couple
how
more.
do you mention your job is to get the vision and have people stick to it? You haven't stuck to much of anything here. And I also like when you're talking to Kevin or these other guys, how do you convince them that you're going to stick to something, and what do you want them to stick to right now?
Right. Well, again, I don't really want to talk about what's happened in the past,
Right.
but I will say going forward, just like I just said, we need that shared vision. We absolutely need it. I think it's critical for our not only short-term, but even our long-term success. And I'm excited about getting a new GM in here to work with him, to work with Kevin, and all of our football personnel to create that vision of what's going to make the Cleveland Browns a winner, and then go make it happen.
Paul, basically, you mentioned the way, your old team, the Cleveland Indians, they got their stable, they got the way things they do here.
Absolutely.
And, I guess what I'm saying is here is just the only way is to change.
And-
And you've been through, 3 head coaches or whatever.
Yeah, and as I said before, I mean, change is in a productive way.
Yeah.
We need some stability to get the right way, and then carry it out over a long period of time. And these things are difficult. You don't sort of institute a way and immediately within 6 months that's the way everything is. They build and build over time. But if you're consistent about implementing it, then I think you'll get there. The other thing I'll say is there isn't one way. I mean, you look at the teams that played this past weekend or the teams that are going to play next weekend, they don't all have the same way. They all do it differently. So there isn't just one way of going about it, but we have to create ours and then own it.
Hey, Paul, obviously some coaches and player personnel guys in the NFL are more receptive to analytics than others, and they're obviously varying degrees for all those individuals. But I guess what I'm getting at is Kevin's philosophies and views about analytics or the frameworks that you're speaking of. How much of a factor was that in I'm sure it wasn't everything, but how much of a factor was it in the decision to go with him when you talk about shared vision?
To be honest, not that much, because I think all 8 of the candidates that we interviewed, I think felt very comfortable with how we were going to sort of operate, and even how they wanted to operate. We were able to demystify it to some degree for them, and I think they realized that, oh, this is just football. I mean, there was the question earlier about the analytics guy on a headset. As Jimmy said, look, that's common practice. I think all 32 teams do that. In fact, there are a bunch of head coaches that say, hey, I'm going to need a guy on a headset, and we were able to tell them, oh, we've got a guy, don't worry. So I think people realize that a lot of what we're doing is really not out of the ordinary. There's just this buzzword that people have used, and they expect something to be sort of very different. But in reality, it's not.
Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Hey, Paul, given the 4 years you've been here and the number of different decision makers, have you felt that your voice hasn't been listened to enough, and do you think that'll change moving forward and started with this process?
No. I mean, look, when I first got here at the beginning of 2016, look, I didn't know the NFL at all. I shouldn't have had a strong voice in anything that was going on. I was trying to learn and absorb as much as I possibly could. And as the years have gone on, not only me, but I think a bunch of people in the football operation have just tried to figure out any way they could help. Any way they could help the team be successful. And I think that's still our mindset going forward. Kevin talked about being better this year than he was a year ago. Hopefully I can contribute more today than I could a year ago, certainly more than I could 4 years ago. But that still means I'm far away from having all the answers. And I think all of us in the building, we don't have all the answers. I've said this before. I think, the group of people who work in sort of research, et cetera, we're probably some of the most uncertain people in the building. I mean, again, that's the foundation of kind of what we do is we're trying to figure out probabilities of different things that might happen or create processes that stack the odds in our favor. So, going forward, we'll continue to work on that, but we definitely don't have all the answers at this point.
We'll go Tony, and then we'll go Mary Kay, and we're done.
Elliot Wolf and Alonzo Heisman, what and who will dictate their future with the team?
Well, I think the GM will certainly have some say in his entire football operations staff. But I will tell you, Elliot and Zoe have, they were very helpful in the head coach search over the last couple of weeks, and they're right now grinding away on the draft and even helping out with assistant coach work. So they've been terrific.
Paul, what lessons do you think you guys may have learned from the Sashi drafts, the two Sashi drafts, where, when John came in, he basically said, now we're going to get some real football players, and wiped out the whole 2 years, basically. So what lessons have you guys learned as you head into sort of the new dawn of the analytics era?
So I shouldn't use that term, real football players, today? Probably not. No, I think, like I said, we learn something every year. And I think people may have assumed that we were doing something in 2016 or 2017 that probably really isn't that close to reality. But I think we've gotten better and better every year in terms of our preparation for the draft and how we synthesize all different pieces of information. Look, I mentioned earlier about frameworks for making decisions. I think the draft is probably as an advanced hiring process as there is in the world, right? I mean, detailed. I mean, our scouts go out and, they not only watch tape on all these guys, they meet their coaches, they meet their teammates, they talk to the trainers, we interview these guys, we test them. I mean, it's exhaustive. I look at that as an analytical process, right? Again, it's not numbers or anything like that, but it's certainly an analytical process where we're using information to try to make a better decision. I think we've gotten better and better at that, every single year, and I think we'll continue to get better at it, going forward.